Howdy, of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Willow. So, the main reason this movie was conveniently on Disney Plus, also, come to find out that this movie had a sequel to it that it eventually is going to come out sometime soon. And so, I really wanted to go on and watch this movie because I never have. And I think I would always get this movie confused with the Tom Cruise movie Legend. And so I was like, okay, and I've never seen either one of these movies until today. I never saw the Tom Cruise movie Legend. Maybe at some point I'll check that out oddly. But so I checked out Willow, and I really thought this movie felt far too much like Lord of the Rings, or to probably feel like the Jim Henson movie Labyrinth. And we have some kooky creatures and this thing, and to me, this movie was supposedly directed by Ron Howard, and I was like, this doesn't feel like a like a Ron Howard film. This feels like a Jim Henson kind of movie. um I don't know, I couldn't get the feel of a of this being a Ron Howard kind of film, but I don't know, maybe Ron Howard films just have to feel like any number of other things. But anyways, but this is to also have that kind of Star Wars kind of visuals of it, especially once we get the monster, the big, huge monster at the end. I'm like, man, this feels like Star Wars with those big monsters and the visual way that they were to look. But yeah, so the thing that I also thought was so goofy in this film is they were tossing so many terminology things. I was trying to figure out what the heck if something was just some name of something somewhere, or if it was actual name of a person. Because it was like, okay, who is this Finn character? What's going on here? Is this Finn as some kind of person, or is it an actual person? And so there was so many things where I was just kind of like, what the heck is a bobbin? What is a no win? What is all this stuff that they're just talking about? It just kind of went over my head. But when really looking at it, if you were to have gone on and never researched a bit of Lord of the Rings stuff and you just went into Lord of the Rings, you'd be like, what the heck is a hobbit? What is a elf? Who's a dwarf? Who, what now? But again, probably a lot of people would have gone on and seen any kind of fantasy movies beforehand and immediately, or maybe they've played World of Warcraft and know what a dwarf or an orf or an elf or a hobbit or whatever freaking things are, because eventually you could possibly understand it by going into a fantasy theme, whereas in this movie, a little bit hard to really go on and gather up some of this stuff. We have a point, we have seem like a normal human child is to be called a daikini. Sure. But yeah, but we not only have Nelwyn, but then we have Val Kilmer, who's Mad Mardigan in this movie, who is consistently calling Delwyn a peck. And so I'm just like, okay, do we just have certain places where people call people certain things? Is that what the story of it is? But so, anyways, this was also a Luke movie, and so it was kind of interesting to see them do something other than a Star Wars project. So that was kind of cool to kind of eventually break it up and have Lucasfilm be doing something other than a Star Wars project, which is just kind of interesting to kind of have that kind of difference for once. Anyways, I think other than that, grading, you can see this on Disney Plus. I would have to go on and say that this movie is painfully too much like Lord of the Rings for me to just say that this is a smaller budget Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring movie. like, so much about this movie just feels like other things, to where I would just rather go on and watch those other things. I had fun with this film. There were some bits and pieces where, like, I really enjoyed what they were doing with Val Kilmer's character in this film, but, like, I wasn't exactly jazzed about this film. When eventually I kind of finished this up, because I've never seen this film before today. And then when I went on and saw this film, I was like, oh, okay, so, like, I didn't really miss much. I didn't really miss much for this film. So I would just have to say that this movie is like a sneeze into okay territory. Like, I just, for the life of me, I can't go on and just say that this is a bad film. But, like, I wouldn't have people rush to see this movie either. Or go out of their way to see this movie. I think if you want to go on and watch the sequel, you're more than likely going to have to be forced to watch this film. But, anyways, yeah. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers about this one. Let's double fire this bad boy up. It's about that time, again, to just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about the time you do spoil this movie. So, we are to go on in the very beginning of this movie, and I guess have it to where we have a woman of sorts who is to be called Queen Bavmorda, and she, of course, is to want every child to all be, like, killed off and everything like that. There's a whole thing about this woman trying to go on and like, need to find this specific child, and the one child who is to be birthed from this woman weirdly has some mark of sorts that this girl is to want to obtain. So we have this woman who is to give birth to her child want to go on and have this woman try to hide away her child and then dump this baby off into this river somewhere for all of a sudden these two kids who are to be called Bobbins, I guess, to have noticed this kid and is to go on and tell their father, Willow, about this child that's in this water. So we have it, of course, where Willow is to scoop up this kid because he, of course, is to have a really busy day. Because we have Willow, who could possibly be chosen by the High Aldwin to be his apprentice. And so we have it to where Willow is kind of gearing up for that, but it seems that Willow is to see that there's something quite special about this kid, and so he's really tempted to just go on and take this kid into town to ask everybody, like, what should he do with this kid. So we go on and we have it to where Willow is consistently treated like crap from a guy named Burklecut. And to the point when Willow is to step up to possibly be the apprentice for High Aldwin. And this guy's like, seriously? Willow is to maybe be this apprentice guy? I don't think so. So we have the High Aldwin who is going through and looking at all these potential people. And so High Aldwin is to now have this test. To have these guys pick which finger is to be the most powerful one. And or which finger would give a person the most power. So we have it to where all these guys are picking fingers and they choose wrong. And so Willow is to go on and pick a finger from High Aldwin. And High Aldwin is to say that none of these guys are to all at all be suited for being these apprentices, and they kind of wrap that up. So we go on and we have Willow, who is to bring this child to the council of Nelwyns to tell them about the child and ask them what he should do. And so High Aldwin is to want Willow to go on and take this child to possibly have him meet up with all the other Daikini that technically this kid is connected to, and just kind of dump them off with one of those people and then leave. So we have it to where High Aldwin is to talk with Willow and is to ask him, it's like, well, hey, like, I bet that the finger that you were to have like pointed at wasn't going to be your first choice. And Willow is to go on and say, well, yeah, like I was going to point at my own finger because it made the most sense. And High Aldwin is like, well, that actually was the correct answer. Like, you should have went with your first impulse. So we go on and we, at first, have Willow, who is to go on with a number of Nelwyns to go on this mission. And it seems like there's some warriors that end up going with him. But then there's also Bucklecut or Burklecut, who goes along because this guy is to consistently give Willow crap. So they're going on and they're hiding this kid after we go on and we start having General Kale, who's to meet with his queen, and they're having problems trying to retrieve this child and they can't find it. And so the queen is to go on and tell them, like, as well as like General Kale and her own daughter, to just like, well, hey, just kind of keep looking for it. I guess like the last people that were to have it were some Nelwyns, and so eventually just kind of like just keep looking for it. So General Kale, as we find out, has this kind of like skeleton looking helmet, and immediately I was like, man, that looks so cool. It has the weird goofy like horn helmet looking thing that just looks so bizarre, but most of the helmet looks really cool, besides the weird goofy side horn pieces that don't make sense to me. So we go on and we have it to where these Nelwyns are trying to protect this child, and at one point the child is to get sick, and so they end up kind of relaxing for a little bit, just kind of eating some meals and hiding out from some people, some unsavory folks. So we then go on and are to have some crossroad where the Nelwyns are to go on and meet up with Val Kilmer's character, who is Mad Mardigan, and he seems to be in this bird cage, and he is desperately asking for water. And this is actually pretty fun. I like this, where we have Mad Mardigan, who is consistently asking for water. It's like, please, just give me some water. And like, we have it to where Willow is to go on and accidentally stumble and drop his water. And then like Val like Mad Mardigan here is to kind of touch the thing of water, and then he's like licking it off his hands, and I thought that that was so funny. So we have to where Mad Mardigan is to want to have this child just given to him. He's like, I'll take care of it, I promise. Like, all I need is to eventually just have a person in my life to take care of, and I'm sure I'll just turn things around. So we all of a sudden have these men who are to supposedly be the Galadorans, and they're all knights. And so we have one prominent knight who's to be Eric. Eric. So it's not E, it's A. So we have Eric who is to meet up with these Nolans. And so Willow is asking Eric if if Willow can hand off this child to this knight, and he's like, no, like, you need to find a woman to just dump that off of. Like, we're going to war, and so we're not going to go on, and we're not going to, like, take care of a child. That just seems bizarre. So we have it to where Eric and Mad Mardigan are to have a history together. And so we find out at some point in this movie that Mad Mardigan is to just be a thief. He's good with the sword, but he's a thief. We have Mad Mardigan who's just desperately wanting to say anything that he can so he can get out of this cage. And we have to where Mad Mardigan is to desperately ask Eric to release him, and he'll fight by his side for whatever this war is. And so we have it to where Eric is not going to let Eric out of this cage, or Mad Mardigan out of this cage. And so really we just transition on to have all these knights go on. And like, we have this knight who's going on and talking about the Nakmars, who are to be like General General Kale and Sorsha. Like, those guys would be like the bad guys, and we have it to where Eric and his knights are technically the good guys in this story. So we have them like go on, and so we finally have Willow who is to release Mad Mardigan from his cage. And they end up giving him this baby, and they give him this milk, and like, Willow is kind of concerned that maybe Mad Mardigan is going to take this milk from himself. And we have it to where, of course, Mad Mardigan's like, no, like, I'm going to give it to this kid. So we have Willow that is to just be left with one guy to help him, and that, of course, is to be Migash. And we have like Migash, because everybody else was to go on and leave, and so we even have Willow who's telling Migash, it's like, well, hey, how about you just go on home and like eventually tell my family that I'll be there. I'll be there soon. Cause we have, of course, where Willow has this wife called Kaya, and like, she is to kind of quickly fall in love with this child, and then Willow is to seem to fall in love with it too. So we transition in this story of Willow being a person who is to notice a kind of flying bird with this little guy called a brownie on top of it, and come to find out we have these even smaller looking guys that they end up calling brownies that are probably like the size of your the size of your hand. We have one of these brownies that is flying on this bird, and they had captured this baby while Mad Mardigan was asleep. So we have Willow, who is with Migosh before he leaves, to have both of them try to chase after this brownie that has this baby, and eventually Willow is to track down these brownies and is to retrieve the baby, but that turns around and has them meet with some wizard woman called Sheralindra, who is to kind of be like the girl from Lord of the Rings, where she eventually is to give that light thing to Frodo, and is to have it at some point where she is tempted to take the Sauron ring and power it for herself, and she goes from a really nice, polite girl to this very evil and kind of character. So that point kind of seems fairly similar. At first, this girl is to come to Willow as it seems as a fairy, then she turns into a much more larger presence. So we go on into this story and have Sherlindra, who is to go on and have Willow do a quest. So she wants, of course, him to go on and find Finn Raziel and take Laura Dannon. Elora is to be the actual name of this child, and so this girl wants Willow to take this child to Ter Ashley, where there should be a good king and queen to protect this woman. Ashley is where we go towards the end of the movie, where eventually we start to see Val Kilmer in that knightly armor, and he is to try to eventually ford off all of those men all by himself, until Eric eventually is to try and somehow help out a little bit with his people. But yeah, so we go on, and Willow is like, wait a minute, I don't think I can go on and do this kind of mission. This seems like something for a night. I'm too short even for a Nelwyn to do this kind of mission. So not only that, but then we also have it where Shalindra is to go on and give Willow this wand to eventually give to Finn. So I'm like, man, this guy is just kind of forced to go on and do all of this stuff whether he wants to or not. So we then go on, and after that we have Willow, who's to be guided by these brownies to try to have these brownies guide Willow to where they need to go. So and we have them kind of going on, and the brownies are kind of saying like, well, let's go this way, no, let's go this way. And so like it doesn't really seem like this feels all that accurate and whatever. So we have Willow with this child, and they go all the way to uh, a roadside tavern, because eventually it's raining. Willow just wants to get into the taverns. They can go on and just kind of like finally just get some rest and whatever. So, because they've been walking for a long stretch of time. So, they go into this tavern and come to find out there seems to be, like, still Mad Mardigan, who is in this tavern, who's to disguise himself as some woman to hide out. But it seems like there's this man that is wanting to, like, be fairly interested in Mad Mardigan in this disguise, and so the more and more Mad Mardigan is to take this child and is to try to get away from this guy, but this guy keeps coming and coming and coming. So we then transition to have Sorsha and General Kale, who are to make it to this tavern and are starting to look through a lot of these children. So we then go on and have to have it to where, of course, both Mad Mardigan and both Willow are just trying to scramble out of here, because at one point we have it to be revealed that Mad Mardigan is actually Mad Mardigan, so it's not actually a woman, it's a man. And so a guy named Lung is to be very upset and starts hitting and beating up people. And so during all that chaos, we have it to where Mad Mardigan and Willow with the child are to scramble off. And we, of course, have Mad Mardigan, who is on this this kind of chariot, and he's kind of really pushing everything to go along here, and to the point where he's kind of tossing apples that were to fill up his chest to kind of smack Willow. So Willow is like yelling for Mad Mardigan, trying to get him to desperately slow down because there's a child in this carriage. So we have all kinds of wildness kind of going on within this chariot. We have at one point the Willows to try to completely stop this chariot, and then Mad Mardigan is asked, like, what the heck are you doing? So eventually we just get to where both Mad Mardigan and Willow ditch the chariot altogether and are going on foot, and that just gets them right back to have Mad Mardigan, who's now like in this technical dress that just becomes this kind of like skirt. And so when we go on and we have, of course, Mad Mardigan is to mention that he is very skilled with the sword, and eventually we'll go on and see that skill being used here. So we eventually have Mad Mardigan, who is to be thrusted within these General Kale and all these people, and we have, of course, Sorsha, that is to make the crack about, like, hey, where's your dress? And Mad Mardigan is just like, well, like, here's all that's really left of it. So Mad Mardigan is to go on and fight these men and is to do a pretty good job of taking them down. So we go on and eventually have it to where, like, Mad Mardigan and Willow get away from these guys and are to scramble to be by themselves. And so eventually this leads to both Mad Mardigan and Willow eventually, like, consistently meeting up with Sorsha and General Pale, to the point where we eventually have to transition to uh, the guys trying to take the fight back to this evil queen, because we eventually have Mad Mardigan and we have Willow, who are to take and find this boat and row their way back, or row their way to meeting with Finn. And Finn, I guess, is to be some rodent, but then we have Willow, who consistently tries to use this wand, and eventually is to change this Finn, this magician, or this sorceress, into a number of different animals. She's to be at one point a like a rodent of some kind, and then she ends up being like a crow, then she ends up being a goat, and like all kinds of goofy like things throughout this film. So now we have it to where Finn wants to go on and fight against Queen Morda, and we also have it to where also Mad Mardigan is to get this dust thrown into his face because of the brownies. So we have it, of course, where Mad Mardigan and Willow to make their way into, of course, Shorsha's camp. And we have Mad Mardigan, who is falling in love with Shorsha, and he is to just kind of count the ways of how he is in love with her by the sun and the moon and all this stuff. And so as we go on and have Mad Mardigan, who's very confused and very like powder drunk or whatever, or like spell drunk, we then have them realize that they're in the villain's camp, and so they have to scramble out of there. But it seems that Sorsha is to start to want to change her tune about what she wants to go on and do. Instead of going on the side of the villains, all of a sudden she's starting to like mac on Val Kilmer, and all of a sudden she's starting to change her tune of like, well, wait a minute, like maybe there's something about this Val Kilmer guy. Maybe I should just start switching sides. So because we go on and have Mad Mardigan, who is to kidnap Sorsha, and eventually is to continue to chase after her after she tries to get away from them. And eventually both Willow and Mad Mardigan are to just kind of run off. We also have this really cool like sled thing that both Mad Mardigan and Willow are to eventually be on. And that is a kind of a cool, interesting kind of moment in this film. But so, anyways, what eventually happens is this leads Mad Mardigan and Willow right back to a bunch of Eric's men who are kind of getting slaughtered by Sorsha's people. And they're all kind of hiding out, which again is to lead to Sorsha eventually getting kidnapped, but eventually she ends up getting away. So there's so much going on in this film. But I always say that for every film. There could be nothing going on in a film. I'm like, there's so much going on. Why is there so many things? So we have to transition to a big battle scene towards the end of this film, where we have, of course, Mad Mardigan, who's to have to like redeem himself and is to try and go on and get all these weaponry and try to make this fight, because we not only have Finn, who's going to change back into a human and go up against this queen, and we have like kind of wizard versus wizard, or sorceress versus sorceress kind of battle here. We also had the really cool moment when Queen but Bavmorda was to go on and take Mad Mardigan and a bunch of his people and try to change them all into pigs. And Finn Raviela was to go on and reverse that. And so, like, it was kind of like a real fun moment where technically Mad Mardigan was a pig at some point, and that was kind of fun. And so technically was Sorsha, because she's on the dark side, or the dark side, the light side, let's just say. So we have it where forcibly Mad Mardigan is to have to be a one-man army, desperately trying to take out all of General Kale's people, simply because all of Eric's men eventually slowly but surely get killed, as well as Eric does also. And so Eric is hoping that Mad Mardigan is going to eventually be the guy that turns the tide of things. And so what ends up happening is Willow is to also have to fight these trolls. And so we had it to where High Aldwin was to go on and give Willow these acorns that could possibly turn things into stone, because it has some magical ability. So Willow at some points is to always try to use this thing, and it never really works within this film. But so we have Willow going and fighting this troll, and he ends up using this wand against one of the trolls, and all of a sudden one of the trolls ends up turning to this big Godzilla looking like monster, and this multiple head looking monster that is to go on and attack really just everybody. And so everybody's trying to take this monster down, which this monster is also to kill some of Sorsha's people and General Kale's people. So it kind of goes on and starts to like dwindle down some bad guys and so on and so forth. So like I kind of like this monster because it kind of evens up the odds a little bit. But eventually they try to figure out that they can kind of chop off one of these heads, and it kills the thing off. So we then go on and have both of these sorceresses, if that's even a real legitimate word, sorceress? I don't know. So we have two of these witchcraft like wizard like characters, even though wizard is a male word. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So we have it where like they're like Finn is trying to fight the queen, and eventually we have it to where like Finn is to have this big stone piece fall over on her, and she's to be taken out. So we have Willow, who's to have to use his abilities and his like intelligence to try to outsmart this queen. So we go on, and we at first have Willow, who's to try to use this wand, and then he tries to use this acorn stone thing, which doesn't work. And so Willow is to go on and use this magical spell that he is to come up with to teleport this baby to another dimension where she will be safe. And we have, of course, the queen, who doesn't believe what Willow is saying. But then all of a sudden we have Willow, who's to make this child supposedly disappear, and come to find out this was to be a whole ruse of a trick, because Willow had used this trick kind of like the pig from before in this movie, and eventually it seems like this girl is gone, but she's actually not. So that gave them the perfect amount of time to eventually figure out how to kill this queen. And so the queen ends up getting kind of like weirdly like kind of mists away or something, kind of like Thanos snaps away, and eventually she ends up getting killed. And so uh the Eber-Sisks the Eber-Sisks was the big Godzilla like monster. More likely, I probably didn't go on and say much of like any technical names of any of these monsters. Like we got on and we had like the death dogs. There were to be those kind of like weird looking, like very hairy looking, like dog creatures. That we kind of had in like a lot of the like the animals that were to look to be tracking down anything were to be these death dogs. And I mentioned the trolls, so like that's like that covers most of everything. So really at this point, now that the queen is dead, and we also go on and we have Mad Mardigan, who is to go on and take down General Kale, and we eventually have it where Mad Mardigan is to crack General Kale's helmet, but then we go on and have Mad Mardigan, who's to stab quite a few times into General Kale to kill him off. So it seems like everybody is taken care of. Sorsha is still on the good side, and so both Mad Mardigan and Sorsha are very lovey-dovey here. So it seems really that Willow can just go on and give this kid to both Sorsha and Mad Mardigan, and they're going to be able to just take care of this child. And that it seems that all is good and well, and Willow can finally just go back to his home and re-meet up with his wife, and eventually be like dubbed like the town hero, and that eventually he'll go on and get like this book of spells that eventually he'll use at some point. And so yeah, like that's just the way that this kind of movie just finishes up. And speaking of which, I think I'm just gonna rush out of here because I think for the most point I've really just said what happens within most of this film. For like most point, I feel like there was some part where like I just kind of had a difficulty transitioning or whatever, but other than that, yeah, really I could just go on and just say that more than likely people could get the clear consensus of this movie, and then that would be all that they're really interested in. Just going on like, yeah, I didn't really care much for this movie either, or no, like I think that you had gone on and you've graded this movie far too harshly. This movie's a great film, so on and so forth. This might go on and oddly be somebody's favorite film, and you know what? Like I cannot not like laugh at that or whatever of that. Like I said, like yeah, if that's your opinion, that's your opinion. If you like this film, like good on you. Like I can't complain about it if it feels like a lot of people were to have enjoyed this film. Like I want to go on and praise this film. I want to go on and see how fun it was and how like there was some good things in here. Really a lot of stuff was kind of coming from Val Kilmer in this movie. As if like man, if they didn't have Val Kilmer's character in this movie would be dead. There was a lot of like comedy coming from Val Kilmer, and I liked his character. I'm kind of curious if there's going to be any kind of thing with Val Kilmer within Willow, regardless of if Val Kilmer can do any kind of verbal stuff, like they can go and just kind of play around with that. It would just be cool to have Val Kilmer in the movie somehow. Like, it doesn't have to be that he has to go on and have a monologue or a speech or whatever. He could just be sitting on a throne, and like that's all you see of him, and like that would be cool for everyone else to do the talking for him and whatever, and him just kind of going on like, yeah, I'm here in this movie. That would be completely fine. Because I've seen other like later Val Kilmer movies. I'm like, oh, okay, so like he's still working, he's still doing things. It's just that a lot of times like other people are doing his dialogue for him, and so like of course, like justifyingly, yeah, like everybody like Val Kilmer is such a fun guy. It's like it was very interesting to see like the documentary that he had gone on and done at some point in whatever. So that said, I think I'm just gonna get out of here so I can go on and have this video a little bit shorter. So bye buddy, bye buddy.